Welcome to the Guns and Gavel Show, where Arizona's self-defense and firearms attorney, Tim Forshey, weighs in on the delicate balance between the law and personal protection. Learn about the legalities and realities of self-defense as he dives deep to discuss firearms laws, legal use of force, concealed carry, and home defense training. The Guns and Gavel Show starts in 3, 2, 1.
How about this one? I think you and I have talked about this before. You mentioned earlier that you won't mention any of these people's names, and I could not agree more. I mean, infamy, ignominy, I couldn't agree more. What about if we made it a law? If we just made a national law tomorrow that there would have to be a media blackout on the image or the name of any of these perpetrators. And then people say, whoa, wait a minute. The First Amendment, Tim, you can't do that. The First Amendment's free speech. It's freedom of expression. We've got to be able, people have a right to that information. My response to that is always, but we do that now. We've done that for the last 70 years in this country with regard to juvenile offenders. We found a certain type of offender that we feel that releasing that information is more harmful than helpful. So we put a media blackout on revealing that information. And it seems to work just fine. Why can't we apply that to another very narrowly defined specific group of people and just say, you don't need to know that person's name. You don't need to see their manifesto that they posted online. You don't like that?
No, I hate it. I hate everything about it.
Well,
because government is always the problem. That's, in my opinion, more laws always suck. Yes, my libertarianism is coming out. My Ron Swansonism is coming out. Okay, fine. And I think we don't even need to do that. I think that, for instance now, the Associated Press a number of years ago decided that releasing the names of sexual assault victims was harmful to them.
Correct.
And so the AP standard now is we don't do that.
Right.
And it dried up like that. Didn't need a law, just done. I have strongly advocated for two rules, the some a-hole rule and the 72-hour rule. That for 72 hours we don't publicize. We say we had a big deal. It's going to take us 72 hours to figure out remotely what went down, so we'll report on it in 72 hours. That's my personal rule. And all it would take is, the AP.
Yeah.
We don't publicize. We don't publicize faces. We don't publicize names.
I guess you have more faith in today's media than I do, because when AP did that years ago, I think the media was a different environment than it is now. But,
well, and I mean, so you got to recognize it's up to us to do that, because the news media in particular, but media in general, they're just like us.
They reflect us, if nothing else.
They are us,
right?
And they are. I always say this when I was in the service, right? So I was in the Navy for 8 years, right? Every individual you met in the United States Navy was almost universally a good human, and almost universally trying hard to defend democracy and to do the things. The Navy as a whole, this big faceless bureaucracy, was maddening and terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, just horrible to deal with. And so the media, right? Every individual in that, I know several reporters.
Sure.
Great humans.
Yeah, of course.
Great humans, doing their very best. But the bureaucracy.
Well, and have you noticed how we always say the government? And we forget that the government is comprised of people just like me and you. I have several friends who are involved in the government. I have a couple of friends that I would say are friends that are politicians. I have a lot of friends that are federal agents. But we always talk about this nefarious, the government.
Right.
But it's the same concept. Yeah, they're good people.
I was at SHOT Show in January. The ATF had a booth.
Yeah.
I would buy there to encourage those poor souls, because those poor guys, it had to be a punishment.
They were getting gum spat out of all day.
It had to be a punishment. But you know what the reality was? I went up, talked to several of them, good people, right? Doing a good work. And the people that were talking with them, they were like, we get it. People are frustrated. There's bracings going on. Let's talk about it. So again, the difference between the individuals and that. And the reality is, if you want to, straight truth, we control the media.
What is consumption? Is that what you mean by consumption?
Yes.
Yeah, right, exactly.
How does the media decide what goes on the show? It's what will bring
we watch. That's right.
Clicks and views.
That's right.
Okay, so if you click it in social media, you are training them.
All right, so I guess we're telling all of you guys, stop doing that. Stop gobbling up these people's names and information like that.
It's 100% true.
It just gives them what they're seeking. It gives them infamy.
And it makes the media it makes them ratings, and that makes them dollars, because that sets their advertising rates. That makes them click-through rates and those things based on the titles, based on the descriptions, based on the pictures. And so, straight truth, if you don't click it,
it will go away.
It will go away. and so that's, and I mean that 100%. Yeah. Who controls it? We do. So you might say, well, we make a law, then they can't. I would prefer, I don't need your law. I will just not click it. And I'm not going to propagate it. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to say, we might say, hey, here's some things that this particular killer that we know that they.
Yeah, if we can learn from them, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
If we can learn from them, if we can make society safer by looking what they did and how they did, I'm all for that.
Right.
But I just don't want to give them the post-mortem publicity that they were obviously seeking.
Yeah, like
so many of them.
You know, the cutout on screen, right? Like, you know,
Right.
so this person, and
Yeah.
I don't want to tell you anything about them
Right.
as a person. I don't want to dehumanize, but at the same time, because those folks all have a story too.
Sure.
You know, they all have a story, but I'm not going to give the next guy the notoriety, because many of them now, you know, this goes back to Columbine, when those
Yeah.
murderers said, we want to be famous, and they got it.
Well, and the Virginia Tech shooter, whose name we both know,
Yeah.
I mean, he literally put a manifesto online, and then the media very happily just went ahead and broadcast the entire,
Yeah.
you know, the whole thing.
The Oklahoma, fertilizer bomb
Correct.
murderer,
Yeah, he did the
wants
same
to be
thing.
famous.
Yep,
You know,
right.
wants to make a point and wants his manifesto read and
Right.
wants people to get his point. And who gets to deny that? We do.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk about him. So I'm a bigger fan of that. So that's the same
I
thing.
like that. And you know, you and I have had that conversation. I always think of myself as a libertarian, but you live it. You walk the walk and talk
I
the
try
talk. So-
to. I mean-
no, you do. You're much better at it than I am, and I appreciate that. I really do. So.
It's the same thing when you say, wait a minute, you know, the vast majority of criminals acquire illegal firearms out of unlocked cars.
Uh-huh.
That's where they get guns. They get them
Exactly
out of
right.
unlocked vehicles.
Well, that's part of the study as well. It said that I think 6% of the weapons used in these mass attacks were actually legally owned weapons.
Right.
The rest were stolen, and that always makes me feel better. It makes me feel like, well, see, the good guys are not part of the problem. It's the bad guys that are caught. But how did they get those
did they
guns?
get the guns?
I always tell people, if I just got out on parole and I want a gun, I'm going to hang out in front of the Walmart, wait for the first F-150 to pull in with an NRA bumper sticker on it, smash the window, and grab the Glock out of the glove box. It couldn't be easier.
Chances are good you won't have to smash the window.
That's
Try
true,
the
it's
door.
unlocked. Yeah, no doubt, right?
Just try the door.
So we make it way too easy for these people, and we've got to stop doing that. I mean, if you're a responsible gun owner, that means you purchase your gun responsibly, you train how to use it, you use it responsibly. You've also got to store it responsibly, because spend the extra $200 on a safe. It doesn't have to be Fort Knox type stuff. You're not going to have Tom Cruise lowering down on wires to break into your house. Just lock it up, and that would probably put a huge dent in the availability of illegal weapons.
100%.
Yeah, big on that.
And again, so who's responsible for that? Well, there ought to be a law. No, there ought to be on us to say, I don't leave guns in cars.
Right.
If, God forbid, I do have to leave a gun in the car, I have a lockbox for that gun
in a safe,
that is hardwired to the car, not just sitting there.
Yeah, it's bolted down.
It's
Yep.
bolted to the
Yep.
car, and then that way, that, you know, again, when somebody pops the door, they're generally not looking for a gun, they're looking for valuables.
Whatever
But
they
a
can
gun
get.
is a valuable.
Very easily sold valuable. That's
And
right.
so they toss your car real quick. If they grab this box and they start to yank it and it won't go, okay, fine, forget it.
That's the number that I've heard is that the average car burglary lasts less than 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So they're going to check the glove box, the console, like you just said. If it's locked, they're going to move on. They're not going to stay
Toss
there
the back
because
seat.
somebody's watching them. They're on video, et cetera. So yeah, and it doesn't have to be some extremely expensive $1,000 custom installation. You can take drywall screws and screw just about anything down to the floorboards underneath your seat. It's not that big a deal to secure these things.
The one that I have in my pickup that almost never gets used because I don't leave guns in my pickup, it cost me $100. It's biometric and it's anchored to the car.
Yeah, there you go.
$100 on Amazon.
Want to cover one last topic and I'll let you get out of here because I know you got things to do too. So let's talk about, I mean, I've been a concealed carry instructor for going on, 29 years, I think, something like that. I guess
Tim, I hate to tell you that you're old, friend.
I am. Well, and that's weird because I'm 37. I keep looking at myself and like, who's this guy in the mirror, for God's sake?
That's what I keep looking in the mirror. Look at all this
This
gray.
fat
And I'm like,
Santa Claus guy. What's going on?
Who's that old guy?
I've been doing it for a long time, and I think it's incredibly important and incredibly valuable that people learn the laws of self-defense.
Yep.
They learn the common sense background for self-defense, but just the whole concept of CCW. We're seeing a huge sweep across the country of constitutional carry.
Love it.
We now have 25. We're soon to have 26. I believe Florida is slated to possibly sign this week. I think Oklahoma and one other state are talking about doing it in the near future. So very shortly, I think we now have, I mean, well, I guess right now it's exactly 50-50, but very soon we'll have the majority of the American states will have constitutional carry where a permit is not required. How do you feel about, because you can carry a gun without a permit, going ahead and going out and carrying a gun?
Well,
What are your thoughts on that?
so I'm of two minds.
As am I. Thank you.
Now-
I feel like I'm a hypocrite about it.
Not two minds of should it be okay.
I
I
agree
see
with you.
all
Okay.
the time. I see people that are completely untrained with firearms,
Yep.
use them to defend their life, and they're functionally no more than a rattlesnake rattle.
Right.
That they draw a gun from wherever they had, and they're basically desk popping, right? Just shooting wildly, pew, 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 pew. Ah, I'm scared, leave me alone,
Yeah.
go away. And it works.
It dissuades people.
It drives bad guys
Also,
off.
there's a lot of luck there.
Well,
did
thank
anybody else
God.
get shot with a straight
Small
round,
bullets,
et cetera?
big world.
Right.
We recently had a badge cam on the channel that Buffalo police fired over 200 rounds into the general public and hit the bad guy twice.
Wow.
So there's 198 rounds unaccounted for, well, except for 2 other rounds hit 2 police officers. So now 196 rounds are unaccounted for at least. Big world, small bullets.
Yeah.
And that's not a good defense. So that said, I see untrained people defend themselves with firearms all the time. I see untrained people that effectively defend themselves with firearms, and so I am, as a matter of principle, all for constitutional carry.
I am too.
That I think the mere presence, and the other part of that is the statistic that says that fewer than 10% of defensive gun uses involve the actual discharge of the firearm. The mere presence of the firearm is where it should be. Okay, cool. So I'm all for it. Now, that said,
you're a firearms trainer as well.
I am an instructor. I'm a master instructor,
right.
and I love to teach firearms skills. So I tell folks all the time, why do I carry a gun? Well, and people say, well, to defend myself against crime, blah, blah, blah. No, more simple than that. I carry a gun because I might have to shoot someone today. And if I have to shoot someone today, I need to be good at it.
That's true.
Because I don't want to endanger anyone else. Because I'm responsible for that. And not only legally responsible for that, but morally, emotionally, mentally, spiritually responsible for that. And so I want to train to be good with it. Now, I'm a training junkie. I like gun school. Gun school is fun.
I never had more fun than most of those classes I take.
Not everybody has to be that. But to have some training, very important, especially in this day and age where we put out great resources like you have. Great resources. There are several YouTube channels that you can learn legal and moral self-defense from the comfort of your own home.
Right.
And I think that it's your responsibility then.
That's just it. I like you. I think constitutional carry is fantastic.
Yeah.
I think you shouldn't have to ask the state permission to exercise a constitutional right. I think that's huge. But the analogy I always use, and this may be flawed, tell me when you think it is that everybody that's watching this video has the right to swing by a Home Depot and buy a chainsaw.
Right.
Doesn't mean it's a good idea.
Doesn't mean it's a good idea for you to own one.
So I agree with you. Most of the time, you're not going to have to shoot it. Et cetera. That's all true. But you've got to prepare for that small fraction of the percentage of time when you might need to. And my daughter is across the street in that apartment building that you're in front of. So I think we owe it to ourselves, to our fellow members of society, that at least a modicum of training. I always tell people, you don't have to be capable of winning the Indy 500 to be able to safely drive your car to a hospital. But you do need to know where the gear shift is and how the turn signal works and how the accelerator works.
So it's actually an analogy that I use all the time. I say, okay, so somebody gets a driver's license, right? They go through the rigmarole wherever they are and they get a driver's license. We generally allow that in most places at 16 years old.
Right.
Okay. So they do that. Are they now a safe driver?
Right. Exactly. Well, the state says they are.
No, God, the most dangerous drivers on earth.
Well, then you get to the people above 85 as well. But
okay.
That's,
But these are your most dangerous times.
Correct.
Okay. So what is it that makes them a safe driver?
Experience and
Experience driving.
That's right.
Right? So it's not the card. Card, and you say, well, at least they have some minimum. No, that doesn't help.
Right.
That doesn't make them safe. It's their responsibility to do that.
Right.
But it doesn't make them safe.
But it's the appearance of safety. It's the certification by the state that says you've met a minimum competent requirement test. I always tell people, I agree, but I always tell people, I use this analogy. Do you all have a friend who's 42 years old who has a valid driver's license who you would not ride in a car with on a $1,000 bet?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then do you all have a friend who grew up like I did in a small rural community where we were driving hay wagons to town behind our pickup trucks at age 14 and waving at the sheriff on the way in, everything was fine with it? Again, so it's this competent certification that the state is bestowing, which, as you point out, really doesn't mean a dang thing.
Well, whenever the state takes a right away from you and then sells it back to you via a permit, they've infringed on your rights.
Amen. There's a libertarian, folks.
Here's my libertarianism talking about why driver's licenses are no good. But same thing with constitutional carry. Now, that said, I maintain my Arizona concealed carry permit because it gives me 37 states of reciprocity. It lets me bypass the NICS system because I've already been background checked when I go to buy a firearm.
Bars and restaurants,
parks, those things,
Navajo reservation, a bunch of other stuff that opens up. That's right.
Yeah. And so I maintain it for that. In fact, I've argued with the powers that be, we're in the process of beginning not just Arizona's CCW, but an enhanced permit.
That's what we've been talking about that. I'm on the Arizona State Rifle and Pistol Association. We've been trying to get an enhanced CCW permit for years that will allow us possibly to carry in schools if we can get that law tweaked right. That would be so smart.
A high level permit.
Same level of testing as a police officer.
I say that we led the nation in concealed carry. We were the first modern state to enact CCW permitting. We were then the first modern state to enact constitutional carry. We should be the nation leading in an enhanced permit.
We can set an example.
We can set an example, and I think we should. So, and I think to wrap that up, I think that constitutional carry is great, but you have the responsibility to be competent. Now, of course, most men, unfortunately, they're raised thinking they are capable of doing 4 things without any training, and firearms use is one of them, and that's not true.
Would you agree with me that the absolute worst student that we ever have to deal with is a 55-year-old male who has been shooting for 45 years, and by God, yes, he's going to keep his finger on the trigger, and you're not going to tell him different.
Yeah, or my dad was a cop, and he taught me to shoot.
There you go.
And, you know, those are the hard ones.
Give me a 20-year-old person that's never picked up a gun before. That's the ideal student, as far as I'm concerned.
I will say, though, that generally, those folks, if they start to, you know, get that way, I just say, hey, let's go watch 5 or 10 videos on the main channel and see 5 or 10 gunfights and how they really go.
Yeah.
Are you up to this task? And then they kind of go, oh, well, I think so.
Maybe there is something you can teach.
Let's work on this. You know, let's work on this one skill set, and hopefully you never need it.
John, I mean, I can't thank you enough for coming in here today.
Yeah,
I know you got a lot of things going on in your life. It really is it's a treat, and it means a lot to me. And all I can say is thank you. Thanks on behalf of the folks watching this, and thank you from me as well.
I always appreciate the time. I think that it's fun. Somebody who gets it, who's, I mean, so much more than I am, right? You know, I just like to talk about that, a judge and a defense attorney and a former prosecutor and all these things, you know, who's seen the system so much, and that it's always fun to bounce ideas off a guy with your stature.
Well, same here. I learn something every single time I talk to you, even if it's just lunch. I learn something from you. So thanks again, man. Appreciate it. Great to see you.
And that wraps up another episode of Guns and Gavels. Join us next time to learn more about the legal use of force, personal protection, and firearms training. Show your support and hit the like and subscribe buttons to make sure you never miss an episode. Till next time, stay safe.